Mechanic black girl bought an abandoned truck, until she discovered $10 million hidden in its chassis. The rust-eaten Ford pickup truck sat like a forgotten grave marker in the back corner of Murphy's auto auction lot. Most folks walked past it without a second glance. The paint had long since surrendered to time, leaving behind a patchwork of orange decay and primer gray. The tailgate hung crooked on one hinge, and the passenger door bore a spider web of cracks across its window. But Danny, Carter saw something different. "That old beast's been sitting here for 3 months," called out Murphy, wiping grease-stained hands on his coveralls as he approached. "Previous owner vanished into thin air about 5 years back. County finally cleared it for auction after nobody claimed it." Danny circled the truck slowly, her trained eye cataloging every dent and flaw. 20 years of life had taught her to look beyond surfaces, and 15 years wielding wrenches in her daddy's garage before taking it over had shown her the bones beneath broken things. The frame looked solid despite the cosmetic damage. The engine, though dirty, appeared intact. Most importantly, trucks like this were becoming harder to find. Vintage Ford pickups from the early 2000s were gaining value among collectors. "What's the starting bid?" she asked, running her fingers along the truck bed's edge. $50. Murphy chuckled. "Hell, Danny, you could probably talk me down to 25 if you wanted. Things taking up space I need for better inventory." $25. Danny felt her heart skip. Even if the engine was completely shot, she could part it out for 10 times that amount. If she could get it running, she might clear 2,000 or 3,000 profit, money her struggling garage desperately needed. Carter's Automotive had been hemorrhaging customers for months. The new chain repair shop on Highway 9 offered oil changes for half her price and had a marketing budget she couldn't compete with. Her younger brother Marcus needed another semester's tuition payment in 6 weeks, and their mother's diabetes medication costs seemed to climb every month. Last week, she'd had to choose between paying the electric bill and ordering new brake pads for inventory. "I'll take it," she said without hesitation. Murphy raised an eyebrow. "Don't you want to look under the hood first?" "Nah. I can fix whatever's wrong with it." 3 hours later, Danny was backing her flatbed tow truck into the garage bay, the mysterious Ford pickup chained securely behind her. The afternoon sun slanted through the garage's open doors, illuminating dust motes that danced around her new project. She'd sent her part-time helper Tommy home early. The kid was good with basic maintenance, but restoration work required focus she couldn't maintain with him chattering about his girlfriend's drama. The first step was always the same: strip everything down to see what she was really working with. Danny had learned this process from her father, who taught her that every vehicle had secrets. Some hid previous accidents behind fresh paint. Others concealed worn parts beneath clean exteriors. The honest ones wore their problems on their sleeves. She started with the interior, pulling out seat cushions that released clouds of dust and the stale smell of old cigarettes. The glove compartment held nothing but a faded registration from 2018 and a handful of gas station receipts. Under the driver's seat, she found a worn baseball cap with a logo she didn't recognize and 37 cents in change. The hood came next. The engine bay was grimy but complete. All the major components were present, though everything needed a thorough cleaning. The air filter looked like it had been wrestling with a dust storm, and the oiled dipstick revealed the consistency of chocolate syrup. Still, these were expected problems, easily solved with time and basic supplies. By sunset, Danny had moved to the truck's undercarriage. She rolled beneath it on her creeper, flashlight in hand, examining the differential and transmission. The exhaust system needed work, and she'd have to replace several rubber hoses, but nothing appeared catastrophic. This was looking more and more like the steal of the century. She was checking the rear axle when her flashlight beam caught something unusual. The chassis had what appeared to be a custom modification, a rectangular panel welded beneath the truck bed that didn't match the original factory design. The metal was different too, cleaner and less weathered than the surrounding components. "What the hell?" she muttered, rolling closer for a better look. The panel was roughly 3 feet long and 18 inches wide, secured with 8 heavy-duty bolts that showed signs of recent installation despite the truck's abandoned appearance. Someone had gone to considerable trouble to hide this modification. The welding was professional grade, not the kind of work done in someone's backyard. Danny's curiosity overtook her fatigue. She wheeled herself back to her tool chest and selected a socket wrench set. Whatever this panel was hiding, she needed to know before she invested more time in the restoration. The first bolt came loose easily, too easily for something that should have been rusted solid. The second and third followed suit. As she worked, Danny felt a growing excitement mixed with apprehension. In 15 years of automotive work, she never encountered anything like this. The 8th bolt finally gave way, and the panel dropped with a metallic clang that echoed through the empty garage. Danny aimed her flashlight into the revealed compartment, and felt her breath catch in her throat. Stacks of bills filled the hidden space, wrapped in clear plastic and arranged with military precision. The bundles were uniform in size, each one thick enough that her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. Even in the dim light, she could make out the distinctive green of American currency. With shaking hands, she pulled one bundle free. The plastic crinkled as she examined it. $100 bills, crisp and clean, bound with rubber bands. She counted quickly, 100 bills per bundle. $10,000. Her heart hammering, Danny began removing more bundles, lining them up on the garage floor like green building blocks. 10 bundles. 20. 50. The compartment seemed impossibly deep, packed tight with more money than she'd ever seen in her entire life. When the hidden space was finally empty, Danny sat back on her heels and stared at the fortune spread before her. She counted again, more carefully this time, her hands still trembling. 1,000 bundles. Each bundle containing 100 bills. Each bill worth $100. $10 million. The garage suddenly felt too quiet, too exposed. She glanced toward the open doors, paranoia creeping up her spine like ice water. Anyone could drive by and see her kneeling beside enough money to buy half the town. Her mind raced through possibilities. Where had this come from? Why was it hidden in an abandoned truck? And most importantly, what was she supposed to do with it? For a moment she allowed herself to imagine. $10 million could save her garage, pay for Marcus's entire education, cover their mother's medical costs for decades. She could buy a new building, hire proper mechanics, maybe even open a second location. The constant stress about money that had become her daily companion could disappear forever. But even as these dreams flickered through her mind, darker questions surfaced. Money like this didn't just appear by accident. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide it, and that someone had been the truck's previous owner, a man who'd vanished without a trace 5 years ago. Danny looked at the abandoned truck, its rust and decay suddenly taking on a more sinister appearance. What kind of person hides $10 million in a vehicle and then disappears? And more troubling still, if someone had put this money here, they might eventually come looking for it. As night fell around Carter's Automotive, Danny carefully rewrapped each bundle and returned it to its hiding place. She bolted the panel back into position, her hands steadier now but her mind churning with possibilities and fears. She locked the garage doors and headed home, but sleep would not come easily. In her small apartment above the diner on Main Street, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, knowing that her life had just changed forever. The question was whether that change would be a blessing or a curse. Tomorrow, she would have to decide what to do with the most dangerous discovery of her life. 3 days passed before Danny found the courage to return to the hidden compartment. She'd spent those sleepless nights running numbers in her head, each calculation more tempting than the last. $10 million. Even if she only kept a fraction, say, 100,000, it would solve every immediate problem crushing her family. Marcus had called twice about his tuition deadline, his voice tight with worry. "Sis, I can take a semester off, work at the plant like Bobby's doing." But Danny knew that if Marcus stepped away from his engineering program now, he'd never go back. Their family had sacrificed too much to let him be the first Carter to graduate college. Their mother's call had been worse. Baby, the pharmacy says my insulin's gonna cost $400 more this month. Insurance is fighting the coverage again. Danny had heard the defeat in her voice, the same tone their mother had used when Daddy died and left them scrambling to keep the garage alive. Now, kneeling beside the truck again, Danny stared at the fortune that could end all their struggles. She pulled out her phone and opened her calculator app, fingers trembling as she typed. If she took just $200,000, barely 2% of the total, she could pay Marcus's tuition for the rest of his degree, cover Mama's medical costs for 3 years, and modernize the garage equipment. The remaining $98 million would stay untouched, waiting for whoever came looking. But deep down, she knew the math was fantasy. You couldn't take a little bit of stolen money and pretend the rest was clean. If this cash was dirty, and money hidden this carefully always was, then touching any of it made her a criminal. The garage's bell chimed, snapping her back to reality. Danny quickly secured the panel and rolled out from under the truck, grabbing a wrench to look busy. Afternoon, Danny. Old Pete Hendricks shuffled through the door, his weathered face creased with curiosity. Pete had lived in town longer than anyone, collecting gossip like some people collected stamps. Heard you picked up a new project at Murphy's. Just an old Ford, she said, wiping her hands on her coveralls. Nothing special. Pete's roomy eyes fixed on the truck with an intensity that made Danny's stomach clench. He walked around it slowly, running gnarled fingers along the faded paint. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. Haven't seen this beauty in years. You know this truck? Know it? Pete chuckled, but there was no humor in the sound. Boy, this here truck belonged to Jake Morales. Used to see it parked outside Rosie's diner every Thursday night, regular as clockwork. The name meant nothing to Danny, but Pete's expression suggested it should. What happened to this Jake fellow? Pete's voice dropped to a whisper, though they were alone. Disappeared about 5 years back. One day he was here, next day, poof. Gone without a trace. Left behind a business, a girlfriend, everything. Police investigated for months, never found so much as a shoelace. Danny's mouth went dry. What kind of business? Import-export, Pete said, making air quotes. Least that's what his fancy business cards said. But folks around here aren't stupid. We knew Jake wasn't moving furniture and electronics across the border. He leaned closer, his breath smelling of tobacco and coffee. Word was he used to run with some bad people down south. The kind of people who don't accept resignation letters. The garage suddenly felt too warm. Danny forced herself to keep working, adjusting parts that didn't need adjusting. That's interesting, Pete. Thanks for the history lesson. But Pete wasn't finished. His eyes glittered with the satisfaction of sharing a juicy secret. You know what the real kicker is? Jake's girlfriend, pretty little thing named Carmen, she swore up and down that Jake had some kind of insurance policy. Said he was always talking about having enough money stashed away to disappear if things got too hot. Danny's wrench slipped, nearly skinning her knuckles. Insurance policy? That's what she called it. After Jake vanished, Carmen tore apart his apartment looking for it. Never found nothing, though. Police figured it was wishful thinking. You know how people make up stories when someone they love goes missing. As Pete rambled on about Jake's mysterious disappearance, Danny felt the walls closing in. The money beneath the truck wasn't just a windfall. It was Jake Morales' insurance policy, his escape fund that he'd never gotten the chance to use. Course, if someone ever did find Jake's stash, Pete continued, his voice taking on a meaningful tone, they'd want to be real careful about it. Money that dirty has a way of burning whoever touches it. After Pete left, Danny stood alone in her garage, the weight of knowledge crushing down on her shoulders. She understood now why Jake had vanished. He'd been running from people who didn't forgive and forget. People who might still be looking for their money. She pulled out her phone and stared at Marcus's number. One call, one small lie about an unexpected insurance payment, and his tuition would be secured. Another call to her mother about a bonus from a big repair job. Would cover the insulin costs for months. The money was right there, 10 feet away, waiting to transform their lives. All she had to do was reach out and take what she needed. Jake was gone, 5 years missing, probably dead. The money wasn't helping anyone just sitting in that hidden compartment. But Pete's warning echoed in her mind. Money that dirty has a way of burning whoever touches it. As evening shadows lengthened across the garage floor, Danny made her decision. She would return to the truck one more time, not to take the money, but to count it again. To memorize exactly what was there. Because if Pete was right about Jake running with the wrong crowd, then those people might eventually come looking for what belonged to them. And when they did, Danny wanted to be ready. Pete Hendricks had always been a talker, but Danny never imagined his loose tongue would sign her death warrant. 2 days after their conversation, she noticed the first car. A black Escalade with tinted windows, parked across the street from her garage for 20 minutes before driving away. The next morning, it was back, this time with 2 men inside wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Danny tried to convince herself it was paranoia. Small towns bred suspicion, and she'd been jumpy since discovering the money. But when the same car appeared for the 3rd consecutive day, her mechanic's instincts kicked in. Something was seriously wrong with this picture. She was replacing brake pads on Mrs. Henderson's Civic when Tommy burst through the garage door, his young face flushed with excitement. "Danny, there's some dudes outside asking about you," he said, practically bouncing on his toes. "Real fancy suits, driving that big black truck. They want to know about the Ford you bought from Murphy's." Danny's wrench froze mid-turn. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing much. Just that you're fixing it up for resale, same as always." Tommy's expression shifted from excited to concerned. "They asked weird questions, though. Like, had you found anything unusual in the truck? Any personal belongings or, what shall call it, modifications?" Through the garage's grimy window, Danny could see 2 figures approaching. Both wore expensive suits that looked out of place in her working-class neighborhood. The taller one had salt and pepper hair and moved with the controlled grace of someone accustomed to getting his way. His companion was younger, broader, with the kind of build that suggested he spent more time in gyms than offices. "Tommy, I need you to take the rest of the day off," Danny said quickly, her mind racing. "Go through the back door and don't come back until tomorrow. But I just got here, and Mrs. Henderson needs her car. Tommy. Go. Now." The kid must have heard something in her voice that brooked no argument. He grabbed his jacket and slipped out the rear exit just as the 2 men entered through the front. "Miss Carter?" The older man's voice was smooth as silk, with the faintest trace of an accent. "My name is Eduardo Vega. This is my associate, Mr. Santos. We'd like to discuss a vehicle you recently purchased." Danny wiped her hands on her coveralls, buying time to think. "I'd buy a lot of vehicles. You'll have to be more specific." "A Ford pickup truck," Santos said, his voice rougher than his partner's. "Blue and white. At least, it used to be before the rust took over. What's your interest in an old truck?" Vega smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Let's say it belonged to a mutual acquaintance. Someone who stepped away from business rather abruptly. We're simply tying up loose ends." The words sounded polite enough, but Danny caught the underlying threat. These weren't legitimate businessmen checking on a friend's property. These were the people Pete had warned her about, the kind who didn't accept resignation letters. "I bought it at auction," she said carefully. "Clean title, all legal paperwork. If your friend has a claim on it, he can take it up with the county." Santos took a step closer, and Danny noticed the slight bulge beneath his jacket. "Our friend isn't in a position to handle legal matters. But before his departure, he may have left certain items in the vehicle. Personal effects of considerable value to his family. I stripped that truck down to the frame." Danny lied smoothly. "Found nothing but old cigarette butts and fast food wrappers. If there was anything valuable, it's long gone." Vega studied her face with the intensity of a poker player reading tells. "Perhaps you missed something. These items would have been well hidden, requiring someone with mechanical expertise to locate them." The compliment felt like ice water in her veins. They knew she was capable of finding whatever Jake had hidden. which meant they suspected she'd already found it. Like I said, I've been through every inch of that truck. It's clean. We'd like to verify that for ourselves, Santos said, his hand drifting toward his jacket. A quick inspection, nothing invasive. Danny's mind raced. If they searched the truck, they'd find the hidden compartment within minutes. Even if the money was still there, they'd know she'd discovered it. And if she'd moved it. I'm afraid that's not possible, she said, forcing steel into her voice. The truck's partially disassembled. Insurance liability issues. Can't have civilians around exposed mechanical systems. Vega's smile finally faded. Ms. Carter, I think you misunderstand the nature of this request. We're not asking for permission. The garage fell silent except for the tick of cooling metal and the distant hum of traffic. Danny measured the distance to her tool chest, where she kept a crowbar within easy reach. It wouldn't be much against two armed men, but it was something. Actually, you are asking, she said quietly. This is my property, my business, and my truck. Unless you have a warrant, you can inspect it with your eyes from the street. Santos's hand moved closer to his weapon, but Vega held up a restraining finger. We appreciate your professional dedication, Ms. Carter. But our associate's property has been missing for 5 years. His family is anxious to recover anything that might provide closure. Then they should contact the police. The police, Vega said softly, have already proven inadequate to the task. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Danny realized she was standing at a crossroads, and every path led into darkness. If she gave them access to the truck, they'd find the money and probably kill her to keep her quiet. If she refused, they'd come back later, probably at night, probably with more men. I think this conversation is over, she said. You gentlemen need to leave. Vega nodded slowly, as if he'd expected this response. Of course. We respect your position. But Ms. Carter, I hope you understand that some family heirlooms are irreplaceable. People have been known to go to extraordinary lengths to recover them. As they turned to leave, Santos paused at the door. Nice garage you have here. Be a shame if anything happened to it. Or to your family. The words hit Danny like a physical blow. They knew about Marcus, about her mother. The research had been done, the pressure points identified. After they left, Danny stood alone in her garage, the walls seeming to close in around her. The Ford pickup sat in the corner like a time bomb, $10 million in dirty money ticking away beneath its rusted exterior. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to her brother's number, then her mother's, imagining the conversation she might never get to have. Outside, the black Escalade cruised slowly past her windows, a reminder that her world had just become much smaller and infinitely more dangerous. The money that was supposed to be her salvation had become her curse. And somewhere in the shadows, patient predators were circling, waiting for their chance to strike. The knock came at 6 a.m., sharp and authoritative. Danny stumbled from her bed above the diner, pulling on clothes as heavy footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Through her window, she could see 2 unmarked sedans parked outside, their occupants wearing the unmistakable uniform of federal agents. Ms. Carter? FBI. We need to speak with you. Agent Sarah Mitchell was a compact woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her partner, Agent Rodriguez, stood silently behind her, notebook in hand. They showed their badges through the door's peephole, and Danny knew she had no choice but to let them in. This is about the Ford pickup you purchased at Murphy's auction, Mitchell said without preamble. We have reason to believe it may be connected to an ongoing investigation. Danny's coffee mug trembled in her hands. What kind of investigation? Money laundering. Drug trafficking. The vehicle belonged to Jake Morales, who disappeared 5 years ago while under surveillance for suspected cartel connections. Rodriguez flipped open his notebook. We've received information suggesting you may have discovered certain items hidden in the vehicle. The room spun slightly. They knew. Somehow, the FBI knew about the money. I don't know what you're talking about, Danny said, fighting to keep her voice steady. I bought an old truck to fix up for resale. That's what I do. Mitchell leaned forward. Ms. Carter, Jake Morales was a courier for the Sinaloa cartel's distribution network. He transported cash proceeds from drug sales across 3 states. When he disappeared, so did approximately $10 million in cartel money. There it was, the exact amount hidden beneath her garage floor. Danny felt sweat beading on her forehead despite the morning chill. "We believe Jake hid that money in his truck before he was killed," Rodriguez continued. "If you've found it and failed to report it, you're looking at charges for money laundering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy." "And if I haven't found anything?" Mitchell's smile was razor-thin. "Then you won't mind if we search your property." Before Danny could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Your mother looks lovely in her blue sweater today. Walking to the pharmacy at 8:30 a.m. is such a routine. Would hate for her routine to be interrupted." The blood drained from Danny's face. The agents noticed immediately. "Problem, Ms. Carter?" Danny stared at the phone screen, her mother's life hanging in the balance. If she cooperated with the FBI, Vega and his people would kill her family. If she didn't, the federal government would destroy her life and probably send her to prison. "I need a lawyer," she whispered. "That's your right," Mitchell said, standing. "But understand that every hour you delay, evidence disappears. And if that cartel money is out there, the people looking for it won't hesitate to kill anyone who gets in their way." After the agents left, Danny sat in her empty apartment, trapped between 2 forces that could crush her without effort. Her phone buzzed again. "Cute agents. Very official looking. Hope you made the right choice." Another text followed immediately. "Be at your garage at noon. Come alone. Bring our property." Danny closed her eyes, feeling the walls of her life collapsing inward. The cartel thought she had their money. The FBI thought she had their evidence. Both sides were demanding she hand over something that could get her killed. But they were both wrong about one thing: they assumed she was helpless. At 11:30, Danny entered her garage and rolled under the Ford pickup one last time. She removed every bundle of cash, stacking them on the floor until the hidden compartment was empty. $10 million in drug money, the source of all her troubles. She loaded the cash into heavy-duty garbage bags, then wheeled them to the corner where she kept industrial supplies. Working quickly, she emptied several containers of motor oil and brake fluid, then began filling them with bundles of money, sealing each container carefully. At exactly noon, Vega and Santos entered her garage. This time, they weren't alone. 3 additional men flanked them, all wearing the hard expressions of professional killers. "Ms. Carter," Vega said pleasantly, "I trust you've reconsidered your position?" "The money's not here," Danny said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I moved it after your visit." Santos stepped forward, hand moving toward his weapon. "Where?" "Somewhere safe. Insurance, just like Jake had." Danny met Vega's eyes. "You want your $10 million? Then we're going to negotiate terms." The garage fell silent. Vega studied her with new interest, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Ms. Carter." "What terms?" "My family stays safe. No surveillance, no threats, no mysterious accidents. You get your money back, and we all walk away clean. And if we refuse?" Danny pulled out her phone, showing them a video she'd recorded earlier, herself placing several bundles of cash into a safety deposit box at First National Bank. "Then your money disappears into the federal evidence system. I've got the box number memorized, and if anything happens to me or mine, my lawyer has instructions to turn everything over to Agent Mitchell." It was a bluff built on desperation, but Vega's expression suggested he was taking it seriously. "Interesting," he said finally. "When and where?" "Tonight. Midnight. The old quarry off Route 7. You bring 5 men maximum, no weapons visible. I bring your money. And after?" "After, we never see each other again." Vega nodded slowly. "Very well, Ms. Carter. You've bought yourself one chance. Don't waste it." As they left, Danny realized she just committed to the most dangerous gamble of her life. She had 9 hours to figure out how to survive the night, outsmart a cartel, and somehow keep her family safe. The money had been her curse, but now it would have to become her salvation. The old limestone quarry had been abandoned for 30 years, leaving behind a crater filled with black water and surrounded by crumbling access roads. Danny arrived at 11:40, her modified Ford pickup loaded with what appeared to be $10 million in cartel money. In reality, only the top layers of each garbage bag contained real bills, the rest was cut newspaper wrapped in plastic, seasoned with motor oil to mask the paper smell. She'd spent the afternoon turning the truck into a weapon. Using her mechanical expertise, Danny had rigged the vehicle's systems with deadly precision. The fuel line now connected to a pressurized tank in the truck bed, ready to spray gasoline at the flip of a switch. The electrical system had been rewired to create sparks on command. Most importantly, she'd welded steel plates beneath the truck and installed a remote starter, turning the Ford into a remotely controlled bomb. Her real insurance policy sat a quarter-mile away, Agent Mitchell and an FBI tactical team, alerted by an anonymous tip about a cartel money exchange. Danny had gambled that federal agents would be more interested in catching drug dealers than prosecuting a desperate mechanic. At exactly midnight, headlights appeared on the quarry's access road. The black Escalade approached slowly, followed by 2 additional vehicles. Vega had brought more men than agreed, but Danny had expected that. She stepped out of the truck, hands visible, remote detonator hidden in her palm. "Ms. Carter," Vega called across the 20 feet separating them. "I admit I underestimated you. Not many people would have the nerve for this kind of negotiation." "Just business," Danny replied. "You want what's yours, I want my life back." Santos and 4 other men spread out in a semicircle, weapons drawn but lowered. The setup was professional. They'd done this before. "Show us the money," Vega demanded. Danny opened the truck's tailgate, revealing garbage bags stuffed with what looked like currency bundles. She pulled out several real bundles, holding them up in the moonlight. $10 million, just like you lost. Jake hit it better than you thought." Vega's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Jake always was clever. Too clever for his own good. What happened to him?" Danny asked, genuinely curious. "Jake got greedy. Started skimming, thought we wouldn't notice." Vega's voice carried casual menace. "We had to make an example. But Jake was smart enough to hide our money before we found him. Took us 5 years to track down this truck. And now? Now we retrieve our property and ensure no loose ends remain." Santos raised his weapon, and Danny felt her heart hammering. This was the moment. Succeed, and she might live through the night. Fail, and her family would be next. "Before you do something stupid," she said loudly, "you should know the FBI is already here." As if summoned by her words, floodlights blazed to life around the quarry's rim. Agent Mitchell's amplified voice echoed across the water. "FBI. Drop your weapons and place your hands on your heads." The cartel soldiers spun toward the lights, automatic weapons tracking toward federal agents. Danny had seconds before the shooting started. She pressed the detonator. The Ford's engine roared to life, startling everyone. Then the fuel system engaged, spraying gasoline in a wide arc across the quarry floor. The electrical spark followed immediately, igniting the fuel in a wall of flame that separated Danny from the cartel soldiers. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions as FBI agents engaged the drug dealers. Vega screamed orders in Spanish while his men returned fire, trapped between federal agents and the burning fuel. Danny dove behind her truck as bullets sparked off its armored undercarriage. Through the flames, she saw Santos charging toward her, his face twisted with rage. She triggered the truck's second surprise, a pressurized blast of motor oil that sent him sliding backward into the fire. But her celebration was premature. Vega had circled around the flames, approaching from her blind side. His pistol was aimed directly at her head. "Very impressive, Ms. Carter. But you forgot one thing, we know where your family lives." The words hit her like ice water. Even if she survived tonight, they'd never stop hunting her. That's when the truck's final surprise activated. Danny had set a timer on the remote starter, and now the Ford's engine revved to maximum RPM. The vehicle lurched forward, its reinforced front bumper catching Vega in the midsection and driving him backward toward the quarry's edge. "Jake's truck sends its regards," Danny shouted over the chaos. Vega's scream cut short as he tumbled into the black water below. The gunfight lasted another 5 minutes before the surviving cartel soldiers surrendered. When Agent Mitchell found Danny crouched behind the burning truck, both women were shaking. "You could have been killed," Mitchell said. "Why didn't you just come to us from the beginning?" Danny looked at the chaos around them: burning fuel, scattered money, federal agents securing evidence. "Because I learned something important about Jake Morales tonight." "What's that?" "He wasn't just a cartel courier. He was undercover FBI, wasn't he? That's why you've been so interested in this case. Jake was your agent, and when his cover got blown, he tried to run with the evidence money." Mitchell's silence was answer enough. "Jake hid that money because he knew you'd never abandon $10 million in cartel assets. He was counting on federal agents to eventually track it down." Danny smiled grimly. Guess he was right. As dawn broke over the quarry, Danny finally understood the truth about Jake Morales, a federal agent who'd paid the ultimate price for his undercover work. His truck had been more than a hiding place. It had been a message, waiting 5 years for someone smart enough to decode it. And now, finally, justice had been served. 6 months later, Danny stood in the gleaming showroom of Carter's Automotive and Custom Fabrication, watching Marcus demonstrate the hydraulic lift to a group of engineering students. The new facility occupied twice the space of her old garage, with state-of-the-art equipment, and a specialized bay for custom security modifications. The FBI's reward for information leading to the dismantling of the Sinaloa cartel's regional network had been substantial: $200,000, perfectly legal and tax documented. More importantly, Agent Mitchell had recommended Danny's services to several federal agencies needing custom vehicle modifications for undercover operations. "The beauty of this hydraulic system," Marcus explained to his classmates, "is the redundant safety mechanisms my sister designed. See, she understands that the difference between life and death is often just proper engineering." Danny smiled, remembering how terrified she'd been about his tuition payments. Marcus had graduated summa cum laude last month and decided to join the family business instead of pursuing corporate engineering. "Someone needs to keep you from blowing yourself up," he joked, but she knew the real reason. Her brush with the cartel had reminded both of them how precious family was. "Danny?" Tommy appeared at her elbow, now wearing the crisp uniform of her head mechanic. "Mrs. Rodriguez is here about her surveillance van conversion. An agent Chen called. The Justice Department approved our bid for the witness protection vehicle contract." The irony wasn't lost on her. The same mechanical skills that had nearly gotten her killed were now making her wealthy. Federal agencies paid premium rates for vehicles that could withstand bullets, bombs, and betrayal. Her mother's voice carried across the showroom as she finished a phone call with their accountant. Diabetes management was no longer a financial stress. The specialized treatment that had once seemed impossible was now routine. More importantly, her mother's role as business manager had given her a new sense of purpose. "That was the bank," her mother announced. "The loan for the second location is approved. You'll be expanding to the state capital by Christmas." Danny nodded absently, her attention caught by a familiar figure entering the showroom. Agent Mitchell approached with her characteristic no-nonsense stride, but her expression was unusually warm. "Danny, the van you modified for the Rodriguez family worked perfectly. The cartel soldiers who tried to intercept them last week didn't even scratch the paint. Armor-piercing glass and reinforced chassis," Danny replied. "Same specs Jake would have appreciated. They'd learn more about Jake Morales in the months following the quarry incident. Agent Jake Martinez, his real name, had been deep undercover for 3 years before his cover was blown. The $10 million had indeed been cartel money, but Jake had been gathering it as evidence while feeding information to his FBI handlers. When the cartel discovered his true identity, he'd had minutes to hide the evidence before they caught him." "There's something else," Mitchell said quietly. "We found Jake's final message." She handed Danny a small notebook, its pages yellowed with age. The inscription on the first page read, "For whoever finds this, you're braver than you know and smarter than they think. Use both. JM." The pages contain detailed information about cartel operations, safe house locations, and financial networks. But the final entry made Danny's breath catch. "If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. But the money you found isn't just evidence, it's opportunity. Take what you need to build something better. The government will get their convictions either way, but you deserve a chance to turn dirty money into something clean. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about redemption." Danny closed the notebook, understanding finally why Jake had chosen such an elaborate hiding place. He hadn't just hidden evidence, he'd created an opportunity for someone like her to find a better path. "The statute of limitations on the reward money expired," Mitchell continued. "Officially, the government considers this case closed. What you do with Jake's final gift is between you and your conscience." After Mitchell left, Danny walked through her new facility, past the custom fabrication bay where her employees were building armored vehicles for people whose lives depended on staying hidden. Former cartel victims, witness protection families, undercover agents, all of them trusting her expertise to keep them safe. The hidden compartment in Jake's truck had contained more than money. It had held a lesson about turning desperate circumstances into purposeful action, about using skills to protect rather than profit. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw your company featured in Security Weekly. Jake would be proud. Stay safe. A friend." Danny smiled, knowing that somewhere in the world, other people were fighting their own battles against impossible odds. Jake's truck had taught her that sometimes the most dangerous discoveries led to the most meaningful destinations. She walked to her office window and looked out at the busy street, where ordinary people drove past in ordinary cars, never knowing how close they lived to extraordinary dangers. But if those dangers ever found them, Danny would be ready. After all, she'd learned from the best teacher possible, a dead FBI agent who'd turned a rusty truck into a message of hope. The money had been her curse, then her salvation, and finally her foundation. But the real treasure had been discovering what she was capable of when everything she loved was on the line. Some insurance policies, she reflected, were worth more than money.